For centuries, the Silk Road wasn't just a trade route. It was the world's most vital artery, pumping goods and ideas between massive empires. We all know the big names, right? Rome, Persia, Han China. But what if I told you that a forgotten superpower once held the keys to this entire network? A civilization that totally shaped history, and then, well, simply vanished.
Just try to picture this. A civilization so powerful, it could muster an army of 120,000 warriors, a force so huge that even the mighty Chinese Empire had to treat them as equals. These people mastered both the harsh, open steppes and built sophisticated cities, becoming the ultimate gatekeepers of the Silk Road.
So that's the big question we're tackling today. They were called the Kangju, and their story is one of the most fascinating disappearing acts in all of history. How could a people so important just fall off the map? Why have most of us never even heard their name?
Okay, so to really get the Kangju, you have to wrap your head around this central contradiction they lived. They weren't just one thing. Nope, they were masters of two totally different worlds. And it was this dual existence that gave them their unique edge. Their whole society was built on this duality. See, on one hand, you had the classic steppe nomads, tough people living in tents, herding livestock, and making up their absolutely feared cavalry. But at the exact same time, another part of the Kangju were living in fortified cities with advanced irrigation, ruling over these lush river valleys. They were both nomad and urbanite, a true hybrid civilization, and that made them unlike anyone else around.
And this dual identity, it was baked into their DNA from the very start. They pop up in the 2nd century BC, basically a fusion of Scythian nomadic tribes and the settled folks already living in Central Asia. They didn't just conquer cities, they created a whole new kind of people, born from the union of the steppe and the oasis.
So how does a lifestyle like that turn into real power? Well, by mastering both of these worlds, they put themselves in the perfect spot to control the most profitable business of the ancient world, the Silk Road.
And think about this number for a second, 120,000 warriors. This wasn't just some mob either. It was an army dominated by elite horse archers who could shoot with deadly accuracy while at a full gallop. This military muscle meant they weren't just taking part in the Silk Road trade. They were protecting it, they were taxing it, and they were controlling it. They were the ultimate middlemen. Now let's look at their neighbors, just to see what made the Kangju so special. You had the Kushans to the south, who were all about building a big empire, focusing on cities and minting their own coins. Then the Wusan to the east were mainly nomads, often butting up with China. But the Kangju? They were different. They held that strategic middle ground, playing all sides and getting rich off of anyone who needed to pass through their land. And we even have first-hand accounts of what they were like. When a Chinese diplomat named Zhang Qian visited them way back in 128 BC, this is what he wrote. They weren't just some client state or a simple tribe. They saw themselves as a major power, and they acted like it. Proud, independent, and yeah, defiant.
Okay, so if they were so powerful, so wealthy, and so independent, where'd they go? Why did they just vanish from the history books? Well, the answer isn't some single dramatic collapse. It was more like a slow, quiet fade that happened over centuries.
They were getting squeezed from all sides. In the 3rd century, you've got these rising empires, the Sassanids and the Kushans, starting to chip away at their territory. Then, in the 4th century, new waves of invaders, the Hephthalites, also known as the White Huns, came pouring in from the steppes. By the 5th century, the political name Kangju was just gone from the map. But here's the thing. They didn't all die out in some huge battle. Instead, they were assimilated. Their people just sort of blended into the new powers showing up in the region. Turkic tribes from one direction, Persian cultures from the other. Their political identity dissolved, but the people themselves, they just became part of the next chapter of Central Asian history. And this right here is the final piece of the puzzle. The very thing that made them so strong, their practical, hybrid culture, also made them almost invisible to modern archaeologists. They used Persian building styles, Chinese art, and Indian religions. So when we dig up their ruins today, it's super easy to mistake them for a Kushan city, or a Sassanid fort, or a Turkic settlement. They're basically hidden in plain sight. But they aren't truly gone, not really. If you know where to look, you can still find the deep foundations of the Kangju civilization, and they're still shaping our world right now. So many of the great cities of Central Asia are standing on Kangju ground. Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan, that was once their urban heartland, called Chech. The legendary city of Samarkand was a key hub under their influence. Their legacy isn't just buried in the dust, it's literally in the foundations of modern cities.
For the longest time, since we only had records from their neighbors, the official story was that the Kangju were powerful, sure, but ultimately they were illiterate nomads, a people of the horse and the sword, but not of the pen.
But then, and get this, just in 2020, archaeologists in Kazakhstan made a jaw-dropping discovery. They found inscriptions on ancient bricks that proved the Kangju had their very own written script, which they got from Aramaic. This one find completely rewrites their story. They weren't just gatekeepers, they were a literate, complex civilization, and we are only just now beginning to hear their voice. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The Kangju were hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years, just dismissed as something they weren't. Their story is proof that history is never a closed book. So the thing to take away from this is a simple question. How many other great civilizations, how many other lost stories are still out there, just waiting for us to dig a little deeper?